The first Marvel Disney Plus show of 2023 has released, and after a huge flood of content from the previous year, we're now in a more slower pace of content, whether it's intentional or not. And when it comes to Secret Invasion, this is a pretty good show to start 2023, on the Disney Plus side, of course. So let's go over the good and the bad this show has to offer. The show follows Nick Fury as he comes back from his space vacation, as he now has to fight a rebellion of Skrulls before they start a war against the human race. But with them shapeshifting into anyone, you never really know who can you trust. Now there is honestly something that I think needs to be said before going more into depth about the show, and that being, if you're going into this expecting a full adaptation of the storyline, Secret Invasion, then you're going to be disappointed. This show is just taking inspiration with obvious elements like the Skrulls impersonating major public figures and the feelings of trust and distrust throughout the characters. While as much as I would have loved to see the comic storyline played out in a series or even being the theme of its own saga, that is not what this is at all, which is perfectly fine for being what it is, and it portrays its own story well enough to be interesting on its own. So if you're going in this with this type of expectation, just get ready to be disappointed. Okay, with that being said, let's get into it. The first thing to take note of is, of course, the one and only Nick Fury. Something that these Disney Plus shows are good at is elaborating more into the characters that couldn't have as much development in the movies, from Wanda, Sam, hopefully Rhodey if Armor Wars is even happening. We take a deep dive into Nick Fury's life and get to see behind the hard exterior he has built for himself over the years. We get to see much of Fury, and it really builds upon his character in the show, but it makes you look at him differently in previous content and even in future ones, hopefully. The show is able to show us how he became a legend and what happened with him in the blip and what happens when a legend has to adapt to a new changing world. We get to know more about the characters like Talos and new characters that come into the fold like his daughter Gaia and new players Sonya Falsworth. Everyone plays into the deceitful spy thriller tone that everyone has been trying to emulate since Winter Soldier, which does a pretty good job at being that tone of a show. With a show like this, you can also expect some moments that do get you by surprise. Like while watching it, there were at least 2 moments that were actually shocking and made me flinch a little, like a surprise gunshot or something. The last episode, though, condensed like the other shows are. It did have an awesome fight scene, and you can tell that this is where they put all of their budget. I mean, they even adapted that Super Skrull, but it's not really the Super Skrull from the comics, because in the comic there's only 4 powers from the Fantastic Four. This version has all of the hero and villain's powers, which honestly kind of made it a little better and cooler. I mean, when Gravik and Gaia were fighting, it was really much like an arcade video game style. That's honestly an aspect of the show that I think they pulled off really well. It even left us off with the world being more scared of Skrulls and other off-world beings, and I think that can honestly be something interesting if Marvel touches upon it in the future. When going into the negatives of this show, though, it's sadly from one of its best premises, that being you're constantly guessing who is who. There are moments when they do a good job of the concept, like having all the major players of the world being Skrulls, but there really isn't that many plot twists involving someone being revealed as a Skrull. Which kind of sucks, because that was one of the main things they were advertising with the show, that we would be shocked to see who we can trust, when in reality it's just characters that we are seeing for the first time in the show, and no major characters of that. Now, seeing how you hopefully seen the show, you're at least warned of spoilers. You probably know that by now it was revealed that our boy Rhodey, War Machine, Carpet Bomber himself was a Skrull, which, let's be honest, half of us at least suspected. I mean, when your only 2 major guest stars, that being Don Cheadle and Kobe Smulders, are the only main MCU stars in this show that were guest stars, at least one of them is not who they seem. I'm not saying that they didn't do a good job at the setup, it's just that it wasn't that surprising if you've thought about it for more than a couple of hours. And that was the only Skrull revealing moment of the show, Rhodey being revealed, which kind of sucks the fun out of the idea of the Skrulls. Finding out that the character we've been following could have been aliens. Over the years, our trust being dismayed. With the show only have no more than 5 characters from the MCU we followed over the years, it kind of gets rid of the added shock factor that could have been in the show. With the show only having no more than 5 characters from the MCU we followed over the years, I mean, it honestly could have been bigger. Like, even its own saga, but it could have worked as a show, and it kind of did. Just not as much as I thought they would. But it's fine. Also, with the episodes getting shorter with every release, it kind of felt like we were dwindling down. The typical not as much room and saving everything for the finale kind of deal these shows have done. Also, no end credit scene. I almost feel betrayed. Although I am curious how they'll deal with Rhodey being a Skrull and being kidnapped for more than a couple years in Armor Wars. Because I think it's before Infinity War, so... Wrapping up though, I will say that this is a pretty good show. A lot of the MCU has been trying to emulate Winter Soldier's style, and I think the show does a good job at it. You know, with it still being its own thing. I love that this is a great look into the mind of Nick Fury and what his story has been in the universe right now, which is really what I think these shows should be used for, focusing on characters that we can learn to love more on into the saga. While I will always enjoy our side stories where we can explore ideas that might not work in a movie, I think shows that do go more into depth of characters that weren't as highlighted in the movie are a best use of this format at Disney Plus. It gives us an already set connection to a character while able to learn more about them. Something I think was well done with Nick Fury. It took us on a journey that really fed into his character and really put him through the ringer in a more emotional aspect. Well, yeah, it does feel like a script that could have been a movie but edited into a show like the other shows of Disney Plus Marvel. And yeah, this honestly could have been its own saga. I think the show really handles the weight a little bit better than the others, and it honestly works for what it is. Again, if you don't compare it to the comic, it's honestly a fun ride, and if you do, you're just gonna have to accept it is what it is for its own thing. Also, since when originally announced this was supposed to be more of a crossover-like series, I think it's obvious that they kind of changed some stuff around when the pandemic and more delays happened in their schedule, that it kind of had to go through a major rewrite a little bit. Honestly, it's a shame, but I can still enjoy a pretty solid series for what we got.